Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English Talk Sessions. I'm Mia, and joining me as always is James. Welcome to episode 4.
Hi, everyone. Great to be back. And if this is your first time with us, welcome. We are really glad you're here.
As always, we speak slowly and use simple, clear words because this podcast is made for beginner and intermediate English learners. So if you don't catch every single word, don't worry at all. Just relax, listen, and let the language flow naturally into your ears.
That's right. You don't need to understand everything perfectly. Just listening regularly is already helping your English grow, even when it doesn't feel like it.
Before we start today's topic, let me quickly connect where we've been so far. In episode 1, we talked about how to stay motivated every single day. In episode 2, we explored how to build good habits through small, repeated steps. And in episode 3, we talked about how to manage your time well, so your energy goes to the right places. Today, we're going a little deeper into something that is very personal and very real for most English learners.
Yes, and I think this might be the most relatable episode we've done so far, because today's topic isn't just about learning, it's about how we feel while we're learning.
That's exactly right. Today's topic is something almost every English learner experiences at some point: why we feel nervous when we try to speak English and what we can do about it. So, James, let me start with a simple question. Have you ever felt nervous speaking English?
Honestly, yes, many times, even now sometimes. There are moments when I know exactly what I want to say, but the moment I open my mouth, the words just disappear. It's a very strange feeling.
I think that feeling is more common than most people realize, and I think the fact that you can describe it so clearly actually shows how much awareness you have about your own learning. That awareness is already a step forward.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I never thought of being aware of the problem as part of solving it.
It really is, because most people who struggle with speaking anxiety don't even stop to ask why it happens. They just feel bad and avoid speaking more and more. And the more they avoid it, the more the fear grows.
That makes sense. Avoidance makes the fear stronger, not weaker.
Exactly. So let's talk about where this nervousness actually comes from, because I don't think it appears randomly. I think there are real, specific reasons why so many learners feel this way.
What do you think the biggest reason is, Mia?
In my experience, the biggest reason is the fear of making mistakes in front of other people. Not just making a mistake privately, but being seen making a mistake, being judged, looking foolish. That fear is incredibly powerful.
Yes, I know that feeling very well. I remember one time I was trying to ask for directions in English, and I said the wrong word, and the person looked at me with a confused expression. Even though it was a very small mistake, I felt embarrassed for the rest of that day.
That story is so relatable, James, and I think most people listening right now have had a moment exactly like that. One small moment of embarrassment that stayed with them much longer than it should have.
Why do you think those moments stay with us so long?
I think it's because our brains are very good at remembering emotional experiences. A moment of embarrassment feels threatening to us, even physically, so our brain stores it as a warning. Don't do that again. It hurts. And the next time we have a chance to speak, that memory comes back and we hesitate.
So the brain is actually trying to protect us in a way.
Exactly. It's not trying to stop us from growing. It's trying to keep us safe from discomfort. But in language learning, some discomfort is actually necessary for progress. We can't avoid it completely and still improve.
That's a hard truth to accept, honestly. It's much more comfortable to just listen and never have to speak.
I completely understand that. And there's nothing wrong with being in a comfortable listening phase for a while, especially in the beginning. But at some point, speaking has to happen. And the longer we wait, the harder the first step feels.
So, what is the second big reason people feel nervous, in your opinion?
I think the second big reason is comparing ourselves to others or to an unrealistic idea of how we should sound. Many learners have a voice in their head that says, "My English isn't good enough yet. I'll speak when I'm ready, when I'm fluent, when I sound more like a native speaker." And the problem is, that moment of being ready almost never comes because fluency only comes through speaking, not through waiting.
That's a painful cycle, isn't it? You wait until you're fluent to speak, but you can only become fluent by speaking, so you never actually start.
Yes, that's exactly it. It's a waiting loop. And I think social media sometimes makes this worse because we see people who appear completely fluent and effortless, and we compare our own beginning to someone else's middle or end. That comparison is never fair to ourselves.
I think I've definitely fallen into that trap before. Watching someone speak so naturally and thinking, I'll never sound like that.
And did you ever stop and think about how long that person practiced before reaching that level?
Probably not. I just saw the result, not the years of mistakes and practice behind it.
Exactly. Every fluent speaker you admire has a long, messy history of awkward moments and wrong words and embarrassing pauses. That history is invisible when you watch someone speak confidently, but it's always there.
That's actually very reassuring to hear. So, the third reason, what would you say that is?
I think the third reason is perfectionism. The belief that if we can't say something perfectly, we shouldn't say it at all. This is very common in learners who are naturally careful or who did well in school by following rules perfectly.
That sounds familiar. I used to feel like making a grammar mistake was almost like failing a test, even in a casual conversation with a friend.
And that's such an important thing to recognize because conversation is not a test. There is no red pen, there is no grade. The only goal of a conversation is connection and communication. And most of the time, the other person understands you perfectly well, even with an imperfect sentence.
So, the standard we hold ourselves to in conversation is often much higher than what is actually needed.
Much higher. Native speakers make mistakes constantly. They use incomplete sentences. They say and you know and kind of all the time. Real spoken language is not like a grammar textbook. It is fluid and messy and full of small errors that nobody notices or cares about.
That genuinely makes me feel a little better, hearing that even native speakers are imperfect.
It should, because it means the goal was never perfection. The goal is simply being understood. And most learners, even at an intermediate level, can be understood. They just don't believe it yet.
So, how do we start to change that belief? Because knowing something in our head and actually feeling it are two very different things.
That's such a good and honest question. And I think the answer starts with very small, safe experiences of successful speaking. Not huge risks, not jumping into a job interview in English tomorrow, but tiny moments where you speak, and it works, and nothing bad happens. That moment is a small victory. And those small victories build confidence one at a time.
That reminds me of something you said in episode 2 about building habits through tiny, repeated actions. The same idea seems to apply here.
It really does. Confidence in speaking is itself a habit. It builds through small, repeated positive experiences, just like any other habit. You cannot think your way into confidence. You have to speak your way into it. I remember the first time I had a short conversation in English that actually went well. It was just 2 or 3 sentences with someone at a coffee shop. But afterward, I felt genuinely proud. And that feeling made me want to try again. That is such a perfect example of what I'm talking about. That feeling, that small burst of pride, is the engine that drives future attempts. Protect that feeling. Look for more of those moments. They are more valuable than any grammar exercise. Now, I want to ask about something slightly different. Sometimes people feel nervous not because they worry about mistakes, but because they worry about being misunderstood, about saying something that means something completely different than what they intended. Have you experienced that? Yes, absolutely. And I think that fear is very understandable, but also something that gets much better with time and exposure. The more you speak, the better you understand how your words land, and the better you become at noticing when something needs clarification. And I think it helps to know some very simple phrases for those moments, like, what I mean is, or let me try to say that differently, or does that make sense? Exactly. Those phrases are incredibly useful. They give you a graceful way out when a sentence doesn't go the way you planned. Instead of freezing in panic, you can smoothly redirect. And that skill itself is a sign of a confident speaker. So even recovering from a mistake is something we can practice. Absolutely. Recovery is a skill, and native speakers use it constantly. Very few people speak in perfect, uninterrupted sentences in real conversations. Most people pause, restart, rephrase. That's normal. That's human. Now, I want to talk about something that I think many listeners might relate to, which is the difference between understanding English and being able to speak it. I personally can listen to English podcasts and understand most of what's being said, but speaking still feels much harder. Why is that? That gap between understanding and speaking is extremely common, and it has a very specific reason. When we listen, our brain is in receiving mode. It's processing input. But when we speak, the brain has to do everything at once: search for the right words, arrange them in the correct order, control pronunciation, monitor meaning, and respond in real time. That's an enormous amount of work happening simultaneously. No wonder it feels so much harder. Exactly. And the only way to make that process feel easier is to practice it directly. Listening makes us better at listening. Speaking makes us better at speaking. They are related, but they are not the same skill. Many learners make the mistake of thinking that if they listen enough, speaking will just come naturally. And while listening helps, it cannot replace the act of actually speaking. So there's really no shortcut. We have to speak even when it's uncomfortable. There's no shortcut, but there are gentler entry points. For example, talking to yourself is one of the most underrated speaking practices. Narrating what you're doing, describing your surroundings, thinking out loud in English. There's no audience, no judgment, no embarrassment. Just you and the language getting more comfortable with each other. I actually tried that recently, just describing what I was doing while making breakfast. It felt a little strange at first, but after a few minutes, it started to feel normal. That's wonderful, and that's exactly the kind of low-pressure speaking practice that builds real fluency over time. Because the more you speak, even alone, the faster your brain learns to find words quickly, to build sentences automatically, without so much deliberate effort. What about speaking with other learners rather than native speakers? Do you think that's useful? I think it's extremely useful, especially in the early stages. Speaking with another learner removes a lot of the pressure because both people understand that mistakes are part of the process. Neither person is judging the other, and that psychological safety makes it much easier to experiment, to try new words without fear. That's a good point. Sometimes I feel more nervous speaking with a native speaker than with someone who is also learning. And that's perfectly natural. A native speaker often speaks quickly, uses a lot of idioms and informal expressions, and might not always have the patience to slow down, whereas a fellow learner understands exactly what you're going through. Both types of interaction are valuable, but starting with other learners can build confidence before moving to more challenging conversations. Now, I want to talk about something that I think is connected to nervousness, which is the role of silence. Sometimes when I'm speaking, I pause to think, and then I feel embarrassed by the silence, and I rush to fill it with words, even the wrong words, just to avoid that quiet moment. That's such an honest and accurate observation, James, and I think many people share that. We are often afraid of silence in conversation, as if it means we are failing. But actually, silence is a completely natural part of conversation. Taking a moment to think before speaking is a sign of thoughtfulness, not incompetence. So we don't need to fill every silence immediately. I agree completely. I've tried many fancy apps before, but I always come back to a simple written list. For me, physically writing something down helps me remember it and commit to it much more than typing it somewhere.
That's a great point. I think people sometimes spend more time organizing their system than actually doing their tasks. A simple system we actually use is always better than a perfect system we never open.
That's such a true statement. Now, before we finish, I want to mention one more idea: batching similar tasks together. Have you tried this before, James?
Yes, I have. Batching means grouping similar tasks and doing them together instead of switching back and forth. For example, I answer all my messages at one specific time instead of checking them throughout the whole day.
I do the same thing with errands. Instead of going out multiple times during the week, I combine everything into one trip. This saves a surprising amount of time and mental energy.
That's very true. Switching between different types of tasks actually costs us more time than people realize because our brain needs a moment to adjust every single time we change focus.
One last idea I want to mention is doing a short end-of-day review. Just a few minutes before finishing work, I look at what I completed and what still needs attention tomorrow. Do you do anything similar, James?
Yes, actually. I write down one sentence about how the day went and one task I want to prioritize tomorrow. It only takes 2 minutes, but it creates a clear bridge between today and tomorrow.
I really like that phrase, a bridge between today and tomorrow. Without it, I think we often start each morning feeling scattered, trying to remember everything at once, instead of picking up smoothly where we left off.
Exactly. And I think this small habit also helps us notice our progress over time, which connects back to what we discussed in episode 2 about tracking. Seeing what we've completed builds confidence for the days ahead.
That's a beautiful way to close the loop between all 3 episodes we've shared so far. Motivation gives us energy, habits make our actions automatic, and time management makes sure that energy and those actions go toward what truly matters most.
So, to sum up everything we talked about today, we covered a lot of ground. Knowing the difference between urgent and important tasks, time blocking, understanding procrastination, matching tasks to our energy, reducing interruptions, avoiding multitasking, understanding Parkinson's law, delegating tasks, saying no clearly, planning ahead and the night before, protecting personal time, resting properly, keeping our tools simple, batching similar tasks, and doing a short end-of-day review.
That's a wonderful detailed summary, James. I think the most important message today is this. Time management isn't about doing more. It's about giving our time and energy to the things that truly matter most.
Exactly. And just like motivation and habits, good time management is a daily practice, not something we master once and forget. It takes small adjustments, day after day.
Well said. I hope our listeners feel inspired to try just one small change this week, even something as simple as choosing 3 main tasks each morning or writing tomorrow's plan the night before.
That's a perfect place to start. Thank you all so much for joining us for this 3rd episode of English Talk Sessions. We really enjoyed sharing these ideas with you today.
If you missed our earlier episodes about motivation and habits, we highly recommend listening to those too. Remember, motivation gets you started, habits keep you going, and good time management makes sure your energy goes to the right places. Start small, be patient, and keep going one day at a time.
Thank you all for listening. Take care, manage your time well, and we will see you in the next episode.
Goodbye, everyone, and see you soon.
Goodbye.